Hi everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Rapping with the Rep. I'm State Representative Ken Gordon, and our guest for this episode, and I'm honored and delighted to have, is our new state senator representing Burlington, Cindy Friedman. Cindy, welcome to our show.
Thank you. Thanks. It's great to be here. And thanks for inviting me.
Thank you, and welcome to the legislature. You know, it's an exciting time for us, and I'm so glad that you'll be joining us. You were recently elected in a special election, and what we're going to do in this show is I want to talk about what brought you to the legislature, what was behind your decision to run. I know you were a teacher in your earlier career, and then I know you worked in the State House for several years. What was involved in the decision to leave that career? Talk to me a little bit about that career and why you started with government.
Okay. So yes, my first career was as a teacher, and I worked for 6 years in the public schools. I was trained as a special education teacher. I did that for a short time, and then I was an elementary school teacher. I was a great teacher for some children and a not so great teacher for others, and I certainly understand what it means to teach a wide array of children with different learning styles, and how much experience and expertise and skill that takes. I actually left teaching and went into high tech for 20 years, where I managed hardware and software groups. And I started as a programmer and then went into engineering. I was a software engineer, moved into management. I loved the challenge of the job, the complexity of the problems. But I think I got to a point where I realized I was working very, very hard for very long hours, and I wasn't sure what I was contributing. So, but throughout that time, I'd been really involved locally with my community in Arlington, with the schools, I was a town meeting member for 15 years. I was on different committees, and I really felt like I was doing something that was important when I was contributing to my community. I was also very involved in politics, and through that I met Senator Ken Donnelly, and helped him with his campaign, and at the end of that he asked me to stay and be his chief of staff. So that's how I got involved with him over the last 9 years.
Right, and we know you were elected in the recent special election because Senator Donnelly, who served so well as our state senator, passed away in April.
Yeah.
Was assisted by you for how many years were you his
9
chief of
years.
staff?
We were we were there together for 9 years.
His entire term.
Yeah.
And for the 5 that I served together, I worked with you as our offices worked so closely together.
Yeah.
So although I know some of the residents who may have a tangential involvement in our state legislators may be seeing your name for the first time. Really, when it comes to helping the residents of Burlington in state government, you've been there all along. And that's one of the things I want to talk about here. You must have some of your priorities already in place, and I know that you've been working on some of those priorities. What's most important to you?
Well, when people ask me what my priorities are, it's a little bit like asking who's your favorite child.
Right.
There are a lot of things I care about. What I understand is that you can be you can be a mile wide and an inch thick, or you can narrow your distance but have a better understanding of each individual issue. So the ones that I focus on are we're very interested, and I'm very interested in healthcare, and I have a kind of special focus on behavioral healthcare and how that fits into our whole healthcare system, and access to services, and parity, being able to get the same level of care for a behavioral health issue as you do for a physical health issue. I've done a lot of work in criminal justice with a specific focus on bail reform, and I think now's we have an opportunity to pass some reforms in that area, and also the intersection of mental illness and criminal justice has been something that I've been involved in for a very long time. I am the lead sponsor of the $15 an hour minimum wage in the Senate, and so we'll be hopefully working on that. Hopefully that will be something that comes before the legislature. We're looking a lot at transportation and access to transportation, expanding our transportation, public transportation networks, keeping public transportation public, and making it affordable and accessible. And general wage inequality, and wage theft. So those are kind of the big, broad state level issues. In terms of the district, when I was campaigning, I heard two things all the time from all 5 communities that I represent. One of them is aging in place,
right,
and being able to stay in not necessarily in your home, but in your community.
right.
Transportation and healthcare. Healthcare and aging in place kind of went together, and transportation, traffic, huge problem.
Right. That's number one.
Across
and number 2 is a little
everywhere,
bit
right.
behind. That's right.
Right.
And as you know, the traffic problems that we have, part of it is a victim of our own success.
Right, that's
our
right.
economy is booming, but with it we've got to manage the
Yes.
traffic that it brings.
Exactly.
And we've all been working hard to do that. You have too.
Right.
Your answer to the question, really, there's a lot to unpack there, because we can do 2 shows on some of those
Yes,
priorities that you
yeah,
have.
absolutely.
You're absolutely correct that we don't focus on one priority. We
Right.
have a number. And I loved what you said about being either an inch wide and a mile, an inch deep and a mile
yeah.
wide, or the other way around, because there are people who come into the legislature, I think, and they think, I've got to know everything.
yeah.
No one can.
Right.
No one can. Or I'm only going to know this. And that's frustrating
Yeah.
for people who want to focus your attention on other things. So we
Sure.
have colleagues who have a lot of experience in all different
Exactly.
areas. And what I
Right.
found is, for myself coming in as an employment lawyer, I have a lot of experience in that area, and I've learned a lot about
Right.
other areas. But we work with each other, and I
Yeah.
think that's a great opportunity here in Massachusetts,
Yep.
especially.
Absolutely. I mean, I had a really great meeting with a group of people from 350 Mass, which is an environmental group.
Right.
And, I was looking at their priorities, which I said, I agree with all of these. But it's an area where I know who in the Senate I go to help me understand the issues. And I take their lead and direction because I trust them, and they are the people that have about a mile's worth of thickness in those areas, and which I can't have just because I have a limited amount of brain space, and
Right.
you know.
But they in turn will come
But
to
they
you
in turn would come to me
and
for-
realize
yes.
your deeper understanding of
Right,
certain
right.
issues, and that's why working in a Congress of people who really get along and respect
Yeah.
each other. We may not always agree with each other,
Right.
but we always respect each other and can trust that when we provide
Right.
information to each other, we're doing it to help each other,
Yep.
and it's been pleasant that way.
Yeah, I think that's true.
And some of the issues you talked about are so important and are also hot button issues right now we're working on in the legislature. Criminal justice reform. It's a great time
Yeah.
to come in and have the intention of working on those issues, because I think you're right, the drug problem that we have, which is a crisis in Massachusetts and nationwide, is one where I think criminal justice reform will help.
Yeah, and I think it also helps us to focus on, and what I'd like to see is how do we address so many of these problems before our criminal justice system gets involved. And I think we as a Commonwealth can do a lot better job at helping people through diversion before they come into our system. And I know for behavioral health, for mental illness, the criminal justice system is the de facto treatment for many people who are suffering from severe and persistent mental illness. And that's just, if you don't believe that it's morally reprehensible that we put people in jail because they're ill, it's certainly economically bad policy to spend our dollars in that way.
You think about for so many reasons, like you said, and then we've got families that are would like to seek treatment
Absolutely, yep.
for their relatives, and they're afraid.
Right.
Because they don't want
Right.
their family members to end up in that system.
Right, exactly.
it's
Because
less-
there's no choice.
There's
Right.
no choice. It's less expensive.
Yep.
It's less costly on the tension and stress of the family.
Yeah.
And I think that we're starting to do that. And we're working together to start
Yep.
to do that.
I would like a little greater sense of urgency.
Right, right.
But I think we are starting to make some inroads in that area, and I hope to keep pushing that.
Yeah, all good ideas are so important.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that you're there to provide yours, because that's an area that we can really help. If we're looking at, for example, substance abuse
Yep.
as one of mental illness
Yep.
and not one of criminal
Criminal-
activity,
right.
then we can begin to address that, and people can feel comfortable knowing that there's help out there
Right.
rather than that there's punishment out there.
Yep.
Because the punishment part, that doesn't work. We've tried that and it
Yeah.
doesn't work.
Right,
Uh,
right. And I think if we're going to do that, we also have to look at the economy and the economics and people's access to good jobs and fair wages. Because, I mean, we've had problems, we've had substance use problems for many, 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 many years. It's kind of been focused more in our inner cities. Now that it's kind of affecting everybody, we have a new light on it. But I don't think we can lose sight of that it's really important for people to have opportunity to have choices in their lives. And when you can't get a job, when you can't pay your rent, when you can't put a roof over your head, when you feel like there is no path for you, then you turn to other means. And I think that the more we can do in education and good jobs and our economy and providing affordable health care, that also will help address some of those problems, because people will have choices.
You're right. When people are desperate,
When people
they
are
make the wrong
desperate, they
choice
make the
often.
wrong choices.
Right,
So,
and
yeah.
they're led to that. Mental health parity is an issue that you just mentioned, and that's so true. It's so much harder when dealing with mental health issues to get the treatment that people need than it is physical issues.
Absolutely.
Insurance is an issue that people sometimes don't get the treatment they need. They can't afford it because
Nope.
the coverage is so poor
Yeah.
for them, and these are things that we can work on
Yep.
to address.
Yep.
Have been, but like you say, with a greater sense of
With a
urgency.
greater sense of urgency, yeah.
It's so important. Locally, we've done forums on this, and I'm glad that you'll be now part of those forums. The issue that people who are aging, who no longer want to have to take to take care of the home that they've raised their family in, find that it's very hard to find a new place to live.
Yep.
Because we don't have the smaller types of residences, whether it's to rent or to own, for people to go to. And so it creates that bottleneck.
Yep.
And that bottleneck then prevents a new family from moving in.
Right.
And it's such a problem.
Yep.
Tell me about some of the stories that you heard, or some of the.
Well, I heard it throughout our district. So I cover Arlington, Lexington, Burlington, Billerica, and Woburn. And the Arlington issues are slightly different from the Billerica issues in the terms that Arlington is very densely populated. And we don't have an opportunity, for instance, to build a lot of new housing. Whereas I think people in Billerica are looking at just at the cost of their houses and wondering, well, how am I going to be able to afford to stay here? And I've heard that in Burlington, Billerica, Woburn, actually Lexington and Arlington. But people are staying in their houses. They are feeling economically distressed by having to stay in their house.
Right.
Or it's a health issue, or the maintenance is overwhelming, and yet they feel that they have no choice. And I think we have to look at a couple things. One very controversial, which is zoning, and how we can smart zone for a wider array of housing that can fit different needs at different times of your life. What I notice is what's being built in places are these, what I call them, millennial condos, or Gen X, or whatever the latest one is,
Right.
Where they're really built for people who aren't going to spend a lot of time in their homes, or they have very small common spaces, but big bedrooms and big bathrooms. And if you're a senior and you want to move out, where do you move? That's a place that better fits your sort of needs and your lifestyle. And so I think zoning can help us do that, some smart zoning, where we have impetus to build better, different kinds of housing. And I think transportation is a huge piece of this. I think we really have to get serious about getting cars off our streets and get public transportation on our streets and give people the options to move from one part of our district to another without having to get into their cars, so people can spread out more. I think one of the things that's happening is that we, especially Burlington, is one of those economic hubs, and as people as people come to work there, they want to be close to those hubs and they want to be able to get to work. And if you have no transportation other than your car, you're just exacerbating that problem, right? Because everybody gets in their cars. If we could have a better, wider, more accessible transportation system, people could move out farther, get to work, take some of the pressure off of our communities, and then I think we would see more affordable and possibly more opportunities for housing for people of all demographics.
Yeah, one advantage that we have here in Burlington is that we've been working, and I know you have too, through Senator Donnelly, with a coalition called the Middlesex 3, which really takes this regional approach to increasing transportation access, realizing that if we're going to continue to go down the one car, one person dichotomy, it just won't work.
It's not going to work.
We clog our roads, we pollute our air. People just, they don't want to get around at that point because it's so hard.
Right. It's also very expensive, so it requires that you be able to have a car, that you can maintain it, that you can pay for the gas. And I know that in Burlington, while you have a huge demand for technology and professional workforce, you also have a demand for retail and restaurant workforce, and those people may be living in Lowell, or know, and how do you there are the people, here are the jobs. We should be working really hard to get that easy access back and forth, and that's, I think, a public transportation responsibility. And I'd like, I know I met with the Middlesex 3 Coalition just the other day with Stephanie and
Stephanie Cronin.
Yep. And I think that that's something that I'm going to be spending a lot of time looking at, because it's really important, and it will serve everybody. It's a win-win for everybody.
Yes, and what we've already done together, like you know, is that the idea that we have with the Middlesex 3 is to create a little transportation access point between Lowell, which has higher unemployment than we have in Burlington. In Burlington, in that area that you mentioned, the restaurant workers and some of the retail workers, there are openings, hundreds of openings, especially in the restaurant industry, and the restaurants can't fill them because many times the workers can't afford to maintain a car, own and maintain a car. They don't want to own and maintain a car. But to get the workers down here, we have to have a way that's outside of the MBTA, because these restaurants are open later than the MBTA runs, and they're open on the weekends, and the MBTA doesn't run on a Sunday, but that's a necessary, that transportation is necessary for them on those days. So what Middlesex 3 has done is proposed this route that will be eventually privately funded, but the restaurants have said, well, just get it going. Just have the government as a public service get it going for us, so that the workers understand it's available to them, because right now they're suspicious of it. So working together, Senator Donnelly, you and I, were able to get a $142,000 grant through the legislature to the governor's desk. We're waiting for him to now sign it, write the check out, but that's where it is. And so we'll continue to work together with Secretary Ash, who is well aware of this, Secretary of Economic Development, Jay Ash, and get this through the last step. But that's so important. It helps Lowell, it helps us.
That's right.
In Burlington.
It's definitely and I want to make sure that our government stays involved in that, because it is a public responsibility. Transportation, I believe, is a public service, and it's not just the workers, but it's the consumers. If people can get back and forth to places like Lowell, well, first of all, people who live in Lowell can come to Burlington and shop and use the restaurants, and people in Burlington can go to Lowell, and it opens up those areas for more economic growth. And that's, I really believe, is our responsibility as, that's one of the good government things that I think we can do is public transportation.
That's right. We start with Lowell because it's a center where people need to get in.
Absolutely. It's a great place to start.
Once we get it on the road, then we can talk about going to the Woburn area.
Right, that's right, and opening it up to our citizens and our residents.
And then our residents can use it too, because what goes in one direction with workers can go in another direction or elsewhere, and our seniors can have more access to transportation.
Exactly.
And like you said, sometimes people say that we should run government like a business, and I think and I hope what they really mean is we should be looking and controlling spending, which makes sense.
Right.
Everybody should do that. But we're not a business.
We're not a business.
Because if we were a business, we wouldn't have parks.
Right.
We wouldn't, there are uses we make for public benefits.
Yep.
And one of the things that we need to do as a government, like you said, as a service, is let's get this thing running, and if there aren't that many people on that bus at first, that's okay, because we need it to have a track record.
That's right.
Because for the people who are on that bus, it's very important.
Very important.
And for those businesses that now see, okay, I can show that potential worker how you're going to get to work.
Yeah.
This is a job with a ride.
Yep.
And that's very important. So we have this in play, and we now need to really expand it. And I'm glad that you'll be supporting with me.
That's going to be exciting. Certainly worth the effort.
Yeah, and that same group is also working on these housing issues. Because like you said, zoning is so important. I'd like to see our state incentivizing the towns, the planning boards and things like that, so that they retain the authority that they have, but we help them to do it through certain incentives, meaningful incentives, so that they know that if they provide these opportunities for some senior housing, they'll get some benefit.
They'll get some benefit, yeah. Absolutely.
Because it isn't. I know there are some bills in the legislature going through, and sometimes we do get what we call a one-size-fits-all approach, and it's scary when you say that, because that also means we don't make progress at all. And so we can divide that up and say, okay, let's find a way to get to this goal while still working with the towns.
And
it's
having
very important.
the stakeholders at the table, but also understanding that everybody has to kind of look at things in a different way, or look at or expand what their ideas of what might work will be, because they're thorny problems. But
they really are.
Yeah. I think the other two areas that I know, that I've spent a certain amount of time in, is sound barriers.
Yes.
And I will continue. I worked a lot with Senator Donnelly on the whole sound barrier issue especially along 128.
Yeah.
And we'll keep plugging away on that one, and look for opportunities to address that. And I've also been very involved in Mary Cummings Park, and so I'm happy to see that there's an agreement now between the City of Boston and the trustees of the reservation. So I think that's going to be really exciting to have the Mary Cummings Park become a real space for people to use and keep it open and keep it available to the community.
Right,
so
a nice piece of open space that we're going to protect.
Yeah.
For those of you who are not aware of the issue, the sound barrier issue is that Route 128 abuts the homes that are on either side of the highway, so close, much closer than in other communities where sound barriers have been constructed.
Right, yeah.
And by federal law, there are certain formulas that are followed and all that, and that's all true. But it's really hard to explain to someone who bought a home before 128 was expanded, so they didn't buy it knowing they were going to be this close. And you can go on Google Maps, and you can see, and people can see for themselves, it's right there, especially in the winter time when the leaves drop. This is a problem, and as you say, we've been working together with Senator Donnelly and I, and my predecessor, Representative Murphy, have been working to try to convince the state government, the DOT, to create these, and so it will continue to work together on that. The other thing I know, I've spoke with Marge McDonald at the Senior Center, and she said you've already made an arrangement just to come in. Senator Donnelly she told me, one of the first legislators who routinely would meet with the seniors in Burlington. I'm glad you're going to carry on that tradition. He influenced me to start it on my side, and I've been, and you know what? It's so rewarding, because the seniors in Burlington have been, they're among the nicest people that I've met, and I enjoy going.
Yeah.
And sometimes they say, oh, thank you for coming, even
Yeah.
when it's not an election. I tell them, well, that's because it's fun,
Yep.
because you're such nice people to
Yeah,
spend time
yeah,
with.
yeah.
So
It's true.
being
Yes.
accessible is important. Folks
Yeah.
listening to this is an interesting conversation, but you'll have the opportunity to talk to Senator Friedman as well, because
Yeah.
I know you'll plan on having
Yeah,
these
I think
public.
we have scheduled over every a Wednesday every month we'll be there, I think, and I believe that next week is the first one. I'll have
Okay.
to look at my calendar, but you can certainly call the Senior Center and find out. And anyone can come. They're open office hours,
Right.
and anybody, any constituent is welcome to come. Just drop in, or you can call our office ahead of time and say, I'd like to come in, and we'll be sure to look for you.
Yeah,
So.
and like the ones that I keep on Thursdays, I know they'll
Yep.
put this on the calendar, the bulletin board that they'll send
Right.
out, so people will be aware of where
Yep.
to find you. And you're correct. Sometimes we'll have people coming from the community who are not
Yeah, it's a great.
haven't reached the
right.
age that they're members of the senior center,
Right.
but it's a time to.
Yeah, and it's convenient. People in the community can get there, so anyone is welcome to come.
There's a lot of work to do, and I really appreciate that you'll be another great partner in working together for the benefit of Burlington. Before we sign off, is there any parting words, any last words you want to leave for the
I don't think
residents?
so. I'm really, I want to thank everybody for the honor of being able to hold this position, and I look forward to working in Burlington and working together with you and with the elected officials in Burlington. And I'm very excited about Truck Day.
Yes, Truck Day is coming up.
Truck
Al
Day's
Fay has
coming
done
up,
another
so-
great job.
So I will see.
That's right. That'll be this coming Sunday, which is I think the 14th.
I think it's, yeah,
I'm not good on dates, but
Yeah,
I think it's
neither
the
am I.
14th of September, and we'll be out there.
right? So
Um,
I'll see you there.
I'll see you there too. And folks, I know that working with Senator Friedman, Cindy Friedman, for the last 5 years, she's a diligent worker, a hard worker, but an effective worker with a great strategy. It's not just hard work; it's the right work. It's making the most of your time in getting things done. And I know that for Burlington, we'll be able to continue to get things done. So we're in good hands.
Thank you.
Cindy, thank you very much for coming on as our guest on Rapping with the Rep. I look forward to having you back. We can continue to talk about
Great.
these issues.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Okay.